Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of Business and Banking Dialogue. Today's topic of discussion is very interesting. We are going to talk about India's payment revolution and what next. And we have a very important dignitary, a very important guest, Mr. Sri G. Padmanabhan. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
So we have been running the show for the last 7 weeks, and we're reaching a milestone of 50 shows. I would like to hear from you, sir. Have you been watching the show, and what do you feel about it?
I have watched few of these shows. In fact, to be specific, I think I did watch Mr. Sarvamurthy's show, is also Gandhi's show. Then Ganesh Kumar, I heard I put on the YouTube and listened to that. So all that I have to say is you have a long list of luminaries who have already talked. So probably you are going down the line and quality by inviting me. But anyway, thank you very much for inviting
me. Not at all, sir. It's actually the other way around. We are privileged to have you, and we'll just get on to the discussion, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. The payments industry in India, as you all know, has experienced a paradigm shift in the last few years. Its rapid rise has been fueled by innovation in service models and customer experience, as well as perhaps by the demonetization. Significant growth in popularity and technology has positioned India as part of now when it comes to mobile payments, and mobile as a form factor to play a significant role in the days to come, both on issuance and acceptance. So today, to discuss on the future payments, I have a very special guest, as I said at the starting of the program. He's an ex-regulator and banker, Sri G. Padmanabhan. Sri G. Padmanabhan is an MBA from the Birmingham University, UK. He joined Reserve Bank of India and was elevated as the executive director. During his successful career in RBI, Sri Padmanabhan has handled various challenging assignments, including director of a major regional office of RBI and head of Department of Payments and Settlement Systems in the bank. As executive director in RBI, Sri Padmanabhan was looking after Department of Information and Technology, Department of Payments and Settlement Systems, and Foreign Exchange Department. Currently, Sri Padmanabhan is the non-exec of the Bank of India. So, he comes with a tremendous experience in the payment side. But ladies and gentlemen, most importantly, in 2013, as a chairman of RBI committee to recommend the feasibility of a gyro model payment systems, his recommendation of implementing India bills payment system, which we all popularly know, people on the payment side know, it's called IBPS, under the gyro model, was the beginning of the payment revolution in India. And that really put the footprint that how does India move ahead? So he is attributed to a fantastic path that he has put forward, and Digital India is moving to that path that he has laid. Good afternoon, sir, and welcome once again to the show.
Thank you.
So, what are your thoughts to the transformation since the gyro model? Are you satisfied with the way India is adopting digital payments?
Thank you very much once again, and let me start like this. I think at least the recent few years, there seems to be a general feeling that the payment system in this country has to do with the 2 Ds, which is the demonetization followed by the digitization. I just want to put the records straight by starting to say that this is a journey which has been started quite some time ago within the Reserve Bank of India, obviously with the support of the government. And this was a path which was getting very, very diligently followed or taken forward by many of us and my predecessors, my colleagues. I think some of them I find their names here. Um, and this was being very carefully and in a very thoughtful manner, which was getting taken forward. Because if somebody woke up in India after the demonetization and read almost every newspaper, he would start to think that the digitization journey, particularly with relation to the payment system, happened in this country as a result of as a result of demonetization. But what I would like to put before you is that because we had digitized, because we had moved forward, in fact, many of the pains of demonetization got reduced. Otherwise, the pains would have been much more. So it is to the credit of the Reserve Bank of India that this was being taken forward in a very careful manner by a set of experts within the Reserve Bank of India. Now, having said that, the other thing that we have to think about is that there are many things. I think one of the things that we need to recognize as far as this country is concerned is that we have one of the best retail payment system, particularly it's a world class. I'm not comparing with any of our neighbors, anybody else, but I am talking about from a world class system. We have built the world class retail payment systems, and the RTGS with 20 or 22 standards again is comparable with any best system in the world. Now, as we build this system, I think what is it that we had in mind basically? I think Reserve Bank was upfront very clear that there were a couple of things which needed to be ensured as far as a payment system to attain scale in a country like India is concerned. One is that it must be interoperable, and the second is it must be ubiquitous. Now, what does that translate from a customer perspective, basically? Now, what is a customer looking at, today's customer, as far as a payment system is concerned? It'll be just interesting to think through that before we come and try to compare as to where we stand in terms of all this. Now, I think there was a research done in the US some time ago, which came out with what people wanted or what could be classified as a dozen payment habits. Let us put it like that. Mm-hmm. So what people wanted was they wanted multiple devices. They wanted to do transactions with their voices. They wanted to do transactions via automatic payments. They wanted payments to be quicker. They continue, despite technology, despite many form factors coming in, they still wanted to pay through the cards, which is an interesting thought. Now, they wanted extensive use of mobile for doing P2P payments. People were happy using the biometrics as an authentication method rather than remembering many other things, because biometrics is something which you just cannot forget. I forget the wallet where I have written my number, the number I have forgotten, so I don't know what is my password. All you need as far as the biometrics is concerned is I don't think you can go out without carrying a biometric. So it makes it simple. Then they chose certain specific payment products. It's often said that after the ATM revolution, one retail payment product which really took off in the world was the PayPal. So PayPal got mentioned. Then they said that I want to do payment always with a sense of enjoyment. And the next 2-3 aspects are very critical when we are talking about today's scenario of COVID and post-COVID. Now, increasingly, people wanted to make contactless payments. Now, this becomes very critical as far as the COVID and the kind of, the protocol that we need to follow is concerned. And finally, without cash, so people just wanted to get away from cash, and people getting away from cash is something that we are witnessing in the COVID era. They are even worried to go to the ATMs, although the cash in the system is increased, which is a mystery that people are trying to solve. And with a growing sense of caution. So they needed to be assured about the safety of the transaction. So what does this all can be sort of put together. What people wanted was convenience. What people wanted was choice. What people wanted was safety. So, Mr. KK, if you just think through the
Yeah.
company that we are speaking on behalf of, EPS, now I can say that E could
Yeah.
represent empowerment or ease of payments. P could represent multiple payment options, and S stands for safety. So ultimately, if you follow EPS, then we are talking about a payment system which is modern and forward-looking.
Yes. Fantastic, sir. Great introduction, sir. And I'm sure people have loved that kind of introduction that you have given. You touched upon a lot of things in the payment system. So, sir, the adoption, one of the new objectives, the adoption of digital payments led to reduction of shadow of what we call as the parallel economy, the cash in the parallel economy, increased working capital, enhanced financial inclusion, perhaps, and bringing to mainstream large unbanked population. Sir, against these goals, assume these are the objectives that I'm sure these are the objectives of getting into the payment systems. Against these goals, can you tell our audience what is the socio-economic report card, or what is the if you were to compare with where are we as the shift to digital payment?
See, this is a very interesting question, because when we try and look at a socioeconomic card or where are we, uh, often the numbers tend to be quite impressive, because
Yeah.
one of the things that yeah, other than the payment system, I was also managing technology in the Reserve Bank of India. I think,
Yeah.
and some of the colleagues who work with me, I see the particularly I see Kaza's name.
Yes.
One of the things that we worried about whenever we thought about putting in place a new system in the Reserve Bank of India was how to size a system. This is true of any central systems that we try to put in place, because the sheer increase in volumes that happen. Take the case of UPI, for instance. I think if you are talking about 2017, somewhere mid 2017, we were
Yeah.
talking about a few million transactions. And fast forward that to beginning of 2020, I think we are talking about 1.3 or 1.4 billion transactions. Now that's a kind of increase in the numbers that are possible, because first of all, this is a large country, fairly with a low kind of achievement in terms of, so the what is possible is quite impressive. But I think the ultimate test of to what extent we have really gone digital, I think it has to do with, we need to compare ourselves with whether the cash transactions have gone down in this country prima facie, or whether the digital transaction per capita is comparable with some of the large economies like, say, China, US, other countries like that. Now, if you, so the honest answer to the question that you raised is that while we have achieved quite a lot that we can boast about, I think always we return to Robert Frost, which is miles to go before we sleep and miles
Yeah.
to go before we sleep. Because what is yet to be achieved is quite enormous. But having said that, whether it's a matter of financial inclusion, whether it's a matter of opening the accounts for direct benefit transfer, now all these things which happened with the kind of scaling up that happened, particularly after the present government came to power, would have been just impossible if it did not have the support of the payment system and the technology behind that. So based on that, I would probably conclude that we have been quite a success, particularly as far as the retail payment system is concerned.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. So that's the one of the greater adoption of digital payments is perhaps in the mobile and UPI. So today I was reading the the electronic copy of Indian Express now that we don't get the normal newspapers. It is dated today, and it says UPI growth is a stupendous 885% in 2019, and overall digital transaction in India has shot up by 330%. It is like a significant growth. Will we be able to top as the #1 country in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of digital adoption? And if it is possible, what do we need to do there to achieve that #1 position?
Okay, now whether it is possible for us to achieve #1, probably the threat that we have that we need to look at is our neighbor, China, which has achieved quite a number, because that's also a large country, and I think the use of digital payment there is quite substantial. So we are far behind as far as that is concerned. Now, it's a fact. I mean, the numbers that you quoted is, I think, following the numbers that which I also quoted, is what is possible to achieve this country is quite enormous. But UPI, please remember, the UPI numbers scaled up not because of this individual aggregation that was happening, but the large players like the Googles or the Amazons coming into this country and starting to do the work of an aggregator. I think they are often called as fintechs, but I think I have a friend of mine who always says the ulta. They are all tech fins. So whichever way you call it, I think if you look at the contribution for the UPI, the enormous increase that has happened because of these people coming in. Now, who is waiting in the wings is a WhatsApp. Once those issues are resolved and they come in, then I think they're straight away bringing in few million transactions into the UPI. So UPI as a central system, particularly a unique, ubiquitous, I would probably say in a positive sense, a kind of a monopoly kind of systems, was bound to succeed, because what is behind UPI? I think UPI removed one big hurdle that all of us faced when we had to do the digital transaction, was to remember multiple authentication credentials. So all the UPI did was to say, to make it as simple as your SMS, you need to remember a phone number or an ID, and with that the transaction goes through. You don't have to remember all his branch, his code, his IFSC, all those kind of things, because everything was taken care of the back end. So we come back to the issue that I flagged in the beginning. For this to really zoom, the digital transactions to zoom in this country, what we need is the convenience. So once the convenience happened as far as this country is concerned, it simply zoomed. Now, your question was, are we missing something if we have to, let us say, make a meaningful race with China in achieving what China could achieve or China has already achieved? Right. I would like to flag a few issues that we need to take care of. And today, probably in any discussion on the payment system, I think people are clearly divided. Now, there are a set of people who think that since cash is no cost, at least no cost, it has a cost to the economy, but it has no cost to the user. If you want to make the user move away from cash and to start digital, everything must be offered free. Now, I belong to the club where I believe that it is simply not possible to make India digital by offering all transactions free of cost. Because please remember that in India, the infrastructure development is still not complete. That's why Reserve Bank recently has set up a fund to improve the infrastructure for payments in various parts of the country. So in a country where the infrastructure development is not complete, now who is going to come in and put in that kind of money unless the government or the central bank wants to do it, if they say that all your transactions will be offered free of cost because cash comes free of cost? So what we need to do I think we need to allow to some extent, and probably I think the best way that I can explain is to compare what Reserve Bank did as far as the NEFT and the RTGS transactions were concerned, particularly the RTGS. Now, initially, uh, the banks were charging all sorts of numbers from the customers for putting through these transactions. And since we were moving from the paper era to the digital era, and the paper era, these transactions happened on an ad valorem basis, I think the same principle was borrowed by the banks as far as the electronic transactions were also concerned. But please remember, in a technology-led transaction, the ad valorem just doesn't make sense. It's a click of a button, whether you are doing a 10 rupee transaction or a 10 crore transaction. But Reserve Bank did not intervene on day one and say that you cannot do this, because there were two things that Reserve Bank was trying to drive it. One, we wanted the system, and pardon me for saying we, because I think it's often said that once a regulator, always a regulator, once a foreign exchange dealer, always a foreign exchange dealer, etc. So sometimes you feel comfortable to explain the position by saying we. So very clearly, when I say we, I mean we in Reserve Bank, but with a clear caveat that as of today, I'm not in Reserve Bank. So that's clearly understood. Yes. So what we clearly did was to make sure that the system adopted the new technology that was brought in, and it took time for them to convince and communicate to the customer. So it was a process that was getting followed. We did not want to disrupt that. The RTGS, I still remember, I think probably some of us who worked together at that time, who are watching this will also remember, it started with few hundred transactions. Then we reached a level of 300,000 transactions a day. We reached a level where people were so comfortable with RTGS, NEFT, etc., so that it would just be impossible for them to imagine a scenario where this is not possible. At that time, Reserve Bank intervened and said that you cannot have any kind of charges. There must be a sort of a capping. And that also is linked to the fact that the infrastructure development was complete, because we are talking about a central infrastructure where it is all complete. So whenever we are talking about pricing of the transactions in a scenario where we are looking at to scale up, it is my submission that we need to clearly distinguish between a central architecture where the infrastructure development is complete and others where it's an ongoing infrastructure which needs to be put in place. So unless this is captured, it becomes very difficult to scale this up to the level because it is scaling with quality. And I think it was one of our former governors, Dr. Subbarao, in one of his speeches in IDRBT said that if you offer anything free, the person cannot demand quality, because the Indian tendency will be to answer, "Tumko fukad milta hai, so why should you complain?" Yeah. That's the first part. Second part, which becomes very critical, is that despite all this, I don't think it is the cost of transactions or the transaction charges which are actually which is the fundamental to drive the transactions in this electronic transactions in this country. I personally believe that what is most critical to be resolved in this country is onboarding of the customers. Now, unless we make this onboarding process simple, I think the customers will be driven away from using the digital transaction because it becomes so onerous for you to onboard yourself. Now, this is a country, unfortunately so, where we have the same set of rigorous KYC norms, whether you are being onboarded for a 2,000 rupee transaction or a huge amount of transactions. So how do we resolve this issue? Can we bring in place what I would call as a risk-based KYC becomes critical as far as the payment system, the digitization and onboarding and scaling up of the payments, digital payments in this country is concerned. the 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 issue which is quite related to this is that even the new discussion papers that Reserve Bank of India has put out, it talks about onboarding what they call a merchant. Now, I have never understood this concept really. As in a digital era, what do we mean by onboarding a merchant? Because ultimately, if you are using, if the merchant is not capturing any data, the merchant is not putting a POS terminal where he can duplicate your cards, blah, blah, blah. It is simply he pulls a transaction and it moves from the customer's bank account to the merchant's bank account. The merchant is already in the system. He has already been verified by somebody. He has come into the system. Now, I think people talk quite a lot about the use of blockchain for payments. But I'm saying that the use of blockchain, if it can avoid multiple layers and duplication of efforts as far as the KYC is concerned, by putting a central database, I think that is which is going to really scale up. Now, what did we do in this country? I think we allowed the system to go in a particular way, and overnight, we cannibalized the entire system by putting a big question mark on the KYC done through the Aadhaar system. So it's a bit of a flip-flop that has happened as far as our country is concerned. And I think if we are able to resolve this, my view is that if ultimately the money is moving from a bank account to a bank account, all that we are doing through a new product, whether it is mobile, whether it's UPI, by whatever name you call it, we are only facilitating a new method of payment as far as the merchant is concerned or the payer of the transaction is concerned. Now, my question to the authorities is that would that require a complete redo of a KYC to say that I am as if I am onboarding this merchant into the system for the first time? So this is a second issue that we need to talk about. I think probably I will talk one more and then maybe we will go on time permitting. I think one thing which is really sort of has a huge potential or which is underperformed in this country is the QR code, the quick response code. I think it has a huge potential, and this country took an enormous step forward in bringing about what they call the Bharat QR, where a set of uniform standards was put in place to make sure that this QR adoption becomes very easy. But it was not followed to the logical end. After the Bharat QR, I think the individual companies were allowed to have their own QR system. So when you walk into a merchant shop, you find several QRs there. Now the question is, the customer, you cannot confuse the customer. I think to probably explain this with a different example, one of the things that we worried about in Reserve Bank of India is the way the denominations will have to be keyed in when you are withdrawing cash from an ATM. For quite some time, I don't know whether this has been resolved completely, for quite some time we had a system where for some banks, if you want 1,000, you want to put 1000, and for others, it has to be 100.00. The paise will also have to be put there. So unless there is simplicity, there is uniformity, and you are not confusing the customer with too many options, it is important to have one system to make sure that this thing stays up. So I'm pleading to the authorities that possibly we have underachieved as far as the QR usage and the use of scaling up of QR is concerned. Maybe I stop here. I have a few points more, but I think as we talk or as we get questions, we can discuss more. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, sir. So really wonderful. The way you put it across, I think the 4 points. Of course, it is debatable whether we should charge for transactions or not. There is a, like you said, there is a section of school which says you should be free to promote, and there's a section which says no, anything free. It's like a free lunch. There cannot be any free lunch. Anything free means quality has to suffer. So that debate will go on, and I guess we will come to some conclusion before we further go into the domain of digital payments. Ladies and gentlemen, I continue to have my discussions with Shri Padmanabhan. Like always, you are welcome to put your questions in the Q&A box. You are also welcome to ask a question directly to Mr. Padmanabhan if you desire to do so. And we welcome both of these. And we will try to get as many questions as possible directly to Mr. Padmanabhan. Okay, sir. So let's look at the current situation, the COVID-19, which is like a disaster, unprecedented disaster. We never thought anything of this sort will ever happen, but it has happened. So has the current Black Swan, like the 2008-9, we are much bigger than that. Like I always say, it's the ugly Black Swan, this one. Has it helped in identifying some trust areas? How would it change the playbook of India's payment revolution? Do you see there's any major transformation happening because of the COVID-19?
See, I think probably I would like to put it across before you that post-COVID-19, all the authorities, whether it is a government or the central bank, they were left in a very peculiar situation. They were staring at a vacuum. What is a vacuum? I think no rule in the world had been written anticipating this kind of a situation. Perhaps the only wise man I heard of in this entire situation was the All England Club, which does Wimbledon championships, which took an insurance for a cancellation of the Wimbledon under any circumstance. I mean, probably somebody would have called them completely foolish if this had not happened. So I don't think the system ever had imagined to deal with a situation like this. But what had COVID brought about? I think COVID had brought about 2-3 things, which was always staring at our face, and I think probably we learned to understand this better. One, again, I go back to the issue of the physical interface with the customer, whether it is for onboarding or whether it is for making out a payment, it just became impossible. So whether it is the onboarding of the customer, which was happening during this time, or a live situation which I heard and I had to deal with in some way, was that the remittances which used to come in, there were the small value foreign exchange remittances which used to come, and it covered recently the Ramadan month also. So during the time when this money came in, the small value, people used to go to their outlets of these money transfer companies and take out the money. But that didn't happen because people were wary of picking up cash. People were completely locked in. They were in containment zones. So how to make this available? So always the question is, do we have a plan B where we are able to get this money across to them in some way or the other? Because payment is also a part of an essential service. Yes, you declared banking as a part of the essential service, and I think we serve the nation by keeping these branches open. I mean, for my bank, I can talk about there are several of our employees who have got affected, but I think we still jugged on and said that this service should go on. But the problem was, how do the customers reach? If the customers don't reach, then how do we enable instantaneously the online payments? Is it something that is possible? When you are talking about enabling these online payments, the counter question that comes is, what's the kind of security risk that we run? Is it something which we have thought about, which we have sort of stress test? And in all these matters, the answer is no. In fact, the other day during our board meeting of my bank, when a cyber security policy had come in or a business continuity plan had come in, I asked them the question, have you just put in there a business continuity plan where people will have to work from home? Now, yesterday, I think the State Bank or somewhere, I saw a tweet where it said that the work from home has further got changed. Now it is work from anywhere. So do we have a system from work from home or work from anywhere? Now, one, it is not not a question of connectivity alone. Let's understand this, because in technology, we have to think about the security.
Security, yeah.
Now, we have to think about what are the kind of audit logs we should be looking at to make sure that we are not looking at something which is unusual. So it's a complete unknown as far as this aspect is concerned. And I think many of us are trying to put in checks and balances to make sure that this happens. So the important question that arises is that, are all our institutions agile enough, fast enough, knowledgeable enough to make the kind of necessary security changes for the show to go on? I think this is where, if we really stress test, we will find that many of our friends are found wanting.
Yeah, true, sir. So yeah, I think unprecedented, and really nobody had thought about creating any contingency for such a situation. Like you said, accepting maybe England, All India England Tennis Association. I read in the papers about that, and it was quite interesting. And even IPL was thinking of doing the same. So we continue our discussion.
Mr. KK, let me let me tell you about your comment about the IPL wanting to do the same. I always like to tell this example is that it's a different ball game to take a life insurance at the age of 19 and at the age of 90. So Wimbledon took it at the age of 19, and IPL is trying to take it at the age of 90. It will be very expensive.
Yes, true, sir. Absolutely, well observed. Good observation, sir. Thank you, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, we are almost reaching 3:40, and I would request you to please put in your questions, because I can then take as many as possible across to Mr. Padmanabhan. So, what's next after UPI? UPI has been a big bang. There's absolutely no doubt about it. We reached the milestone of 1.3 billion transactions. So, what is the next big breakthrough like UPI you envisage, which will take us to the next level?
No, I mean, I think to give you a specific product would be very difficult, because I think there are a couple of things that the regulator is also looking at, and what we need to be conscious about. I think one is in any technology related company, or whether there is a company like the NPCI, I think the regulator clearly has started feeling the discomfort about what they call the too big to fail, or the concentration kind of risk. So today they're talking about new umbrella entities or new umbrella organizations, which will probably make sure that this risk gets dispersed. Now, this is very critical. Now, in every aspect, whether it's all products being concentrated in one, or even within the product, there can be competition between the two entities, which will ensure the quality of service, also the pricing gets driven down in favor of the customer. The only thing, if there are two or three entities competing with each other, particularly the public infrastructure entities that the regulator keeps worrying about and wanting to make sure, is that in this competition, there is what they call no race to the bottom. So as long as the race to the bottom is not happening, I think the competition is always good as far as the payment system is concerned. That's why I started off saying that the payment system had to be interoperable and it has to be ubiquitous. Now, unless, so more entities offering this, it'll be good. So what's a kind of new, I mean, there are several. I think I heard Mr. Ganesh or somebody else saying in the show that, or in another show saying that tomorrow payment or the payment can happen by wink of an eye. You simply wink your eye and looking at your device, and your payment goes through. He must have said it in a lighter vein. And in a more lighter vein, I think you have to be very careful even today as to whom you are winking at. Otherwise, anyway, your payment will go through. So that's very critical. But the other way of looking at it is, I think India has also started a very, very important regulatory initiative, which has happened elsewhere in the world, and what we call the regulatory sandbox. So the
Yeah.
ideal way for this payment system to experiment and move forward is to use this regulatory sandbox. There are a couple of things that I would like to flag here. I think one of the countries where it became quite, famous for this regulatory sandbox, which attracted the world attention, was a tiny nation called Singapore. Singapore had a huge sandbox initiative. It was driven by an Indian who was working for the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and there were a huge number of experiments that happened through this regulatory sandbox in Singapore. The question I asked the gentleman is that how many of these experiments have got converted to products? Very few. But this is where India could make a difference, because if a product is found to be successful, the scale is being assured immediately in a country like India because of its sheer size.
Yeah.
But there, the only thing that we have to make sure is that there cannot be further boxing in of regulatory sandbox where the regulator comes and says that these are the areas where I would like the regulatory sandbox or innovations to happen. I think innovations happen on its own. Innovations cannot happen through direction. It's like a cuckoo to sing well will not be a free bird. You cannot put it in a cage and ask it to sing your tune. It will sing only your tune. It will not be the best of tunes. So if that is adopted and you are really driving this regulatory sandbox in the proper manner, I think we will not be short of ideas. So suddenly there'll be a big idea that would come through. And I'm waiting for that moment, because once that happens, I think the scaling, as I said, just happens like this as far as this country is concerned.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Sir, I mentioned in the beginning that we have two types of questions that can come either in the chat box or it can come directly. So we have a question that that the gentleman would like to ask you directly. Mr. Ishwar Murthy, can you please unmute, introduce yourself, and then ask the question directly to Mr. Padmanabhan? Mr. Ishwar Murthy. Okay, perhaps he has some problem. So let's get on, sir. So there are many reasons why why we have propelled. What about the trinity called JAM? Has that propelled the digital adoption in India?
JAM has been a great experience. I think JAM has really propelled the digital Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and the mobile. No doubt about it. I think there are few things that this is brought about. Interesting observation of having these anonymized information driving the UPI really to great heights, where the observation was that one of the reasons why the mobile banking directly or mobile payments directly did not have the kind of success except when linked through the UPI was the fact. This was very interesting, where somebody observed that I think a large population in India who have the mobile phones are the women folks. And the women folks do not want calls coming to them at all sorts of times on their mobile, so they were not very happy to give the mobile number which would be displayed at a public, anybody can get details of that number. So
Right.
one of the things that we have to think about is that how to make sure that the customer is not put off by some of the aspects. As of now, I think one of the biggest challenges that we look at when we are trying to drive digitization in this country, I would like to pick up two issues. The first issue is because of the fact that the cash, there is anonymity kind of thing. Now that anonymity, people are afraid, which is getting lost as far as the digital transactions are concerned, because in digital transactions you clearly are able to get the audit trail of any of these transactions. And the second issue related to really the kind of safety, because the kind of problems that come about. So when you are inducting a large part of the population into a formal banking or payment channel, other than the safety, it is important to ensure during the first few months, they do not have a bad experience. And even if they have a bad experience, they are getting compensated immediately. Now, I would always like to take this example of this, the e-commerce giants who became successful in a country like ours, because you can return anything, no questions being asked. So
Yes.
so dealing with a customer complaint will have to be as simple as that. Now, there are enormous amount of restrictive practices that happen in our country, and I would like to address this through one suggestion, and I'm sure that this is going to be controversial. It has already become controversial. Is that in a digital world, we need to ensure that in a country like India, you opt for a service. So it must be everything is denied unless asked for, other than here the default option is yes to everything. I knew there is a storm which has been created because of Reserve Bank of India coming out with certain regulations stating that for the foreign exchange transaction, for the e-commerce transaction, for online transaction, the customer will have to ask for this. But there are enormous number of stories where the customers who have never done online transactions have been fished into doing the e-commerce transaction. And this e-commerce transactions once done, we have a strange system where if you want to return something which you have bought, you can return within 10 days. But if I want to cancel an order because, I mean, other third party, because somebody informs the bank that this is not a genuine transaction, this is a fraud. So please don't go through these transactions. I believe, I mean, this is what I hear. I believe that the companies say that once the order is confirmed, it can be cancelled only by the person who has placed the order. What happens if the person who has placed the order is a fraudster? He won't cancel. So what I'm saying is, when we are talking about these kind of issues which are peculiar to India, because India practices the kind of jugaad which no other country practices, we need to have solutions to have to address this jugaad.
Yeah. Right. So very, very interestingly put through. So we could not get across to an earlier gentleman, but we have another gentleman who would like to ask you a question. Mr. Venkatramani would like to ask you a question. Mr. Venkatramani, please introduce yourself, unmute, and then introduce yourself and ask the question.
I just generally thought I've been seeing the growth of UPI transactions. Just to introduce myself, my name is Venkatramani Prakash, and I take care of the retail business in FX Cash World Money for the foreign exchange business. My question might be slightly incorrect from a context perspective. I have seen the growth of UPI transactions in India, and it is very convenient for the customer while making a payment to another colleague or a friend, where you can just use an UPI ID and make the payment. It is also convenient for a large player like an Amazon or Flipkart to collect payment from the customer, because nobody gets charged on that transaction, unlike a huge payment gateway which is absorbed by poor in the ecosystem. So it's great for them, and that kind of a transaction. But I don't know whether it is also sort of not great for the payment gateway companies who have built their business models on payment gateway charges, and there is payment gateway charges and a lot of movement towards UPI means that a lot of transactions by the convenient or other conventional channels might reduce. So there might be a death knell for the payment gateway companies. So I was just wondering if there should be some sort of a pricing regulation where the payment gateway companies can mark up the prices, and that sort of pricing also comes for a transaction from a customer to Amazon. So that there is like a debit card, there is a regulation. So that kind of pricing can come. So there is a slight higher markup on the transaction, so that the payment gateway companies can also use UPI in a proper way and make some money.
Okay, see, my comment on that would be that I would personally be against any kind of direction which tells the market what they should be charging or they should not be charging. The only thing I would worry about is whether the large companies are trying to take the competition away by offering free charges up to a particular time. I would be worried about the fact that once the competition is out, then the customer will have to pay with probably as a backdated effect as to pay. Now, except for that, I'm not very certain as to how the regulator can say that you shall charge this much, you shall charge this much more. There have been few instances where the regulator has intervened, but basically I think the market will have to find its level. Otherwise, I think, see, the worry that I have about the regulator stepping in as far as the pricing is concerned is that it will obviously be a wrong number for someone. It will be either for the person who is charging or the person who is charged, because very few times, if you believe anything about the law of probability and the success of the regulator, I think we have come and achieved the right price. So it is some number which could either favor someone and be of disfavor to somebody else. So personally, I am of the view that it should be done. And if there is an unequal competition on account of the size, that needs to be addressed to some other means rather than the government or the regulator getting into the pricing.
Right, sir. Thank you. I hope, Mr. Venkatramani, your question has been answered. Thank you very much for asking this question. I have a next question from Mr. Mayur Shetty. He's from the Times of India Group. So his question to you, sir, is under the government scheme to provide loans up to rupees 10,000 to hawkers and vendors, borrowers are entitled to receive cash back only if they accept payments digitally. Given literacy levels, is this push justified?
Well, whether if you are questioning whether the people with low levels of literacy would adopt mobile payments, I think we ourselves were quite surprised at the way in which the mobile transactions took off in the beyond tier 3 centers. So I think it will be possibly wrong to assume that they may not be able to do it, but it depends upon what's the kind of technology that we are able to provide them. If we are going to give them a complicated technology and the complicated system that is being put out, let's say in a superstore, then obviously that is going to create problems. But if we are going to make it as simple as a mobile message and transfer and things like that, I don't think it should have a problem. But on a fundamental, a different note, if the question is not whether he will be able to accept technology or not, whether this is a method through which you think that technology adoption becomes possible, or is it being unfair? I think that's a debatable issue, but I would plead that that's something which should be taken offline. I don't think it fits into the main scheme of this discussion.
Right, sir. Okay, so we are approaching the hour for session. So some quick questions to you, sir. Should we allow direct access to technical switch and clearance and settlement facilities to non-banks to accelerate digital payments?
Okay, I think this is an issue, I think, which I myself have been debating with many others.
Yeah.
I mean, let me answer that very quickly, since we are reaching the end of the hour. Is
Yes.
that, to my mind, there cannot be a distinction between a bank and a non-bank as long as he is an authorized entity of the Reserve Bank of India.
Right.
Once the person or the entity has been licensed by the Reserve Bank of India, then I
Yeah.
think all the facilities that are available to a similar person being a bank must be available to the non-bank also. Otherwise,
Yes.
I think it will be again creating an unequal level.
Absolutely, sir. Sir, I would like to continue with my quick questions, but I would like to take one question directly from Mr. one question from Rajendran. He asked a question to you, sir. So Rajendran is the CEO of IFTAS. He says, cost of transaction to customers are varying from 1 rupee to 1,000 rupees. For example, airlines, school charges as convenient fees. Is there a need for fee regulation? What is your view in this regard?
No, I think I've answered this question. I don't think there must be a fee regulation which must get directed. Probably there could be a sort of a cap, or which is in discussion with the market players. The regulator, the government taking a decision and arriving at a number, as I said, may not be the right number. So there must be extensive consultation with the market. 1,000 rupees as a convenience fee probably is a lot of inconvenience, I would like to say. So I don't think that's a right method forward. But I think when you are trying to put a number and the number is not covering the cost of the transaction, this is precisely the point that I'm trying to say. The market will find a new name to what they want to charge and charge it. So if you say convenience fee, they will tomorrow call it some other fee. So ultimately, I think any kind of regulation in pricing will have to come with interaction with the market. I am saying that the market will ask for the moon, the government and the Reserve Bank will ask for zero, but somewhere the truth lies in between somewhere. And the closer we are to the truth, that will be the better for the market.
Right, sir. Thank you. I have a direct query questions coming to you from Nikhil Kumar. Nikhil, please introduce yourself and ask the question.
Sir, I am from Utkarsh Small Finance Bank. This query is particularly related to um, the geography where we are. Still the hinterland of India, people don't have access to smartphone, and there are issues related to networks. So what is the plan to, if we are trying to make inroads into those hinterlands, what is the plan, payment in regulator is looking into? How we
I think
can make it more?
already there are technologies which are available, which does not require a smartphone. So obviously, the way forward must be to make available technology where a smartphone is not a must. And if that is something which can be put through a regulatory sandbox quickly, I think the Reserve Bank should welcome it. But already, I mean, my own understanding is there are already technologies which are being run by NPCI where the smartphone is not a must. But then NPCI, if you say, is not the only entity, there could be other entities. I think there must be solutions found to work, which will work not essentially on a smartphone. That's the only way out. There is no other method out.
Right, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Nikhil. So continuing my quick questions and the answer. Should we amend the PPI regulation to allow non-banks to issue open system PPIs via maybe a graded risk-based mechanism?
Well, that's a view, because the problem that the Reserve Bank had, at least I was a part of the payment settlement system department when we actually brought out the first set of guidelines on PPI. So I would say that a cash in and a cash out outside the banking system did raise a concern at that point of time, because at that point of time there was no other. So today, where I could ensure the identity of a person, because there's a national identity, the national identity was not there at that time, because those were the times when we were trying to do the PPI, the mobile phones, all this kind of things. And I think day in and day out in the Reserve Bank, we use PPR, the example of M-Visa. I think in the issue there in M-Visa was that M-Visa, when it was implemented, they already had a national identity system. So the question is, what is the risk that we are running? And ultimately, are we prepared to accept that in a large country like ours, if the convenience is the primary motive, there could be 5 to 10% of the people who could misuse this facility. But once this facility is misused, if you are going to go after everyone in the system will simply crumble. So we will have to take a conscious call what we want. And for small value transaction, let's say for 2,000 rupees cash in and cash out, is it going to create a real risk to the system? And that's a call which has to be consciously taken. What are the, if the authorities want any kind of, the counterbalancing measures that the market will have to take, they will have to take. But the problem is when this is being discussed, the Reserve Bank will quote the example where when they were permitting cash in through the prepaid and the cash out was happening at the other end or being given to the family members, etc. What really was happening is in the outlets there were one mobile number which was attached to 10,000 accounts.
Yes.
Now, if that is the way that we onboard, then the regulator will always be wary of giving any kind of freedom further. So I am saying, please understand that asking for any more facilitation comes with a responsibility. And if you are prepared to discharge that responsibility, then the discussion is on a level playing field as to whether this facilitation does create a systemic risk, and if not, why not give it a try?
So, should we create a threat of competition for an NPCI?
Yeah, that's why I think I don't think we need to labor much on that. The Reserve Bank has already come out with a paper stating that they want to give more licenses to a national umbrella organization entity. That is precisely the that will be a sort of a challenge to the NPCI. But whether that is going to also compete with it for the products that is already run by NPCI, or whether it is going to be a new set of products which will not be again going to NPCI, that makes sure that there is no competition issue that is getting resolved, but what is getting resolved is a concentration risk issue. So what exactly the final way in which it is going to come out, we'll have to wait.
Should we explore the option to split regulatory and operational functions of NPCI?
Well, I must say that I have not thought about it that much. Whether the regulatory functions of the NPCI, as long as we are certain that there is no conflict of interest that is happening, that is fine. But then I think that's a matter on which probably I personally would need more evidence to give you sort of response. Otherwise, I'll be talking there.
So my final question to you, sir, while banks and non-banks can issue closed and semi-closed PPIs, only banks are allowed to issue open system PPIs. Why not the non-banks?
That's what we just answered just before this, right? Where yes. I said that probably we need to have some kind of a stricter controls in onboarding, not one mobile number again, 10,000 PPIs and things like that. So I think that answer that we have already answered. If unless there is a new nuance that you would like to ask, I will be happy to answer.
No, I think we have past exceeded the time, and we value your time, sir. So we don't want to exceed further time. We already overshot without your permission. So, Sri Padmanabhan, thank you very much for coming over. And we have so many things we have discussed in the future of payments. Okay, in the course of the discussion, you also defined EPS as to stand for empowerment, payment options, that is multiple payment options, and safety. And we talked about why UPI had and how because of the aggregators it really shot up. And if once WhatsApp comes in, it's like going to go up significantly. And we also talked about UPI removal, multiple authentication, and many other topics we went through. And it was wonderful talking to you. At this point, I would like to thank my audience also, which includes a lot of journalists and writers and professionals from the BFSI. So once again, my many thanks to you for coming over, spending your time. In fact, you spent extra time with us. Thank you very much. And we would love to invite you once again, because there's so much to talk on payments with you. And you have a you're a fountainhead of knowledge on payments. So we would love to invite you once again, and we'll be happy to host you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.